This is how my Sega Saturn now boots up. Straight into a menu of some 130 games. Practically the entire US library, with some PAL and Japanese exclusives sprinkled in for good measure. I can now boot any game, at any time, without needing the original disc. How is that possible? Through the Satiater, an Optical Disc Emulator, or ODE for short, that allows you to play games from an SD card. This is a fantastic piece of kit, but at $260 it's got a steep asking price. And in my case, I stupidly managed to spend around 340 British pounds. Yeah, we'll get into how I managed to do that in just a moment. Obviously, something drew me to this product and compelled me to purchase it. Now, I've had my Sega Saturn since I was 7 or 8 years old. It originally belonged to my best friend, Richie. We'd spend hours at his house playing Sonic R and Die Hard Arcade together. We'd pass the controller back and forth for single-player games like Tomb Raider, Croc, and Casper. Yes, as in the friendly ghost. It's actually a pretty fun little puzzle game. Richie's mum sold his console and all of his games to my mum so Richie could, in air quotes, upgrade to a PlayStation. That's a sale Richie regretted so much for such a long time that, in our college years, I bought him another Saturn and a copy of Die Hard Arcade. I still have that same childhood console. I still play those same discs. Whenever I do, it takes me back in time, to another world. The only thing missing is my Player 2. That seat's now occupied by my kids as I live a good 5 hours away from Richie these days. Playing the Sega Saturn gives me a sense of nostalgia and happiness. I guess you could say it helps me feel the sunshine as it brightens up my day, but it's also tinged with this weird sense of melancholy and longing. I miss the days I associate so heavily with this one machine. I have legitimately teared up while playing this thing. To say I was heavily emotionally invested when buying a Satiator is a gross understatement. There's something about the Saturn's aesthetic of low-poly models and odd colour palettes that I wanted to experience more of. I wanted to extend that feeling it gives me, which is so precious to me. Having the entire Saturn library available to play at any time, without having to perform open console surgery, and while protecting my disk drive from wear and tear? Sign me up! If you look at the Satiator website right now, you'll see the card costs $259.99 USD. So how did I end up spending £339.90 GBP? Well, after currency conversion and paying for shipping from the US to the UK, my order came to £229.20. I also grabbed a 64GB microSD card to store the games on, which added another $9.99. Now, you might reasonably think that would be it. Nope! I got slapped with customs charges. £59.68 in customs charges, to be precise. Okay, but Sam, that still only brings your total to £298.87. Where's the other £40 odd? So, I live in a PAL territory. I have a PAL Saturn, and due to differing TV standards at the time, where 50Hz was the norm here instead of 60Hz, many of our games run at different resolutions and speeds. Typically, a PAL game from that era is expected to run around 18% slower than its NTSC counterparts. To address that, I purchased a 60Hz modding service from eBay seller Corey and Miles7. It was only $29.88 with shipping, and it was something I'd been meaning to have done to the console for a long time anyway. Like an idiot, I forgot to factor in me posting the console to the modder. Now, this is my childhood console. It's very important to me, so like an overprotective parent, I forked out for full tracking at £11.15 so I could see exactly where my baby was at every step of its journey. To be perfectly clear, If you live in the US and you have an NTSC console, the Satiator will be significantly cheaper for you. You'll enjoy much lower domestic shipping costs, you won't have to worry about getting slapped with customs charges, and you don't even have to think about 60Hz mods. If, on the other hand, you're a European or Australian Saturn fan, get ready to see the costs tick up faster than an ill-advised New Year's Eve taxi ride. Now, of course, I fully accept that these factors are completely outside of Professor Abrasive's control, and this is not a criticism of him, his Satiator product, or his price point. Cost is also a very difficult thing to quantify. Depending on how much money you make, a Satiator could be a drop in the ocean, or something you'll need to save up all year for. Any item's price point is subjective, as it's often considered in proportion to your disposable income. You could easily make the argument that, by the time you've bought yourself a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga, you're already spending as much, if not more, than you would on a Satiator. That could be a good way of justifying the cost. I mean, my wife didn't accept that argument on the grounds that she wouldn't be happy with me buying Panzer Dragoon Saga either, but let's not go into that right now. There is a cheaper alternative to the Satiator in the form of the Fenrir. I did seriously consider the Fenrir, but it requires you to know if you have a 20 or 21 pin Saturn, and means permanently removing the disk drive. The Satiator is plug and play by comparison. You just open the video CD bay and slide it on in. You don't have to take your Saturn apart, and with this being my childhood console, that was really appealing to me. It's also portable. I could potentially take this to a friend's house and pop it in their Saturn. In fact, I'm looking forward to doing exactly that when I next visit Richie. Enough about the cost. Does it actually work? In short, yes. The Satiator is my 4th ODE project, having already obtained solutions for my Dreamcast, GameCube, and PlayStation 2. This has been, by far, the simplest to not only physically install, but also add games to. You need to head to the Satiator website and grab 2 files, the menu software and the firmware. Plonk those onto an SD card, add your games as 1 folder per game, and that's it software side. Now take that SD card and slide it into the SD card slot on the Satiator, open the video CD port on the back of your Saturn, and slide the Satiator in until you hear a click. That's it! You're ready to go, it's really that simple. The menu is no frills, but it loads quickly and serves its function with no fuss. This is the extreme of function over form, and honestly, that's absolutely fine by me. So far, the only compatibility issue I've encountered is sadly on Burning Rangers, one of the main games I wanted to play on this thing. I get a black screen after choosing a save file. Now, I can't say with certainty that the Satiator is at fault here. After the US release consistently wouldn't work for me, I found the PAL version of the game, and that seems to run just fine. This leads me to believe the issue may be linked to my 60Hz and region mod, rather than the ODE. Another great feature is being able to play fan projects. The Saturn doesn't seem to have a big homebrew scene, but there are a lot of fan translations of JRPGs to dive into, with the Satiator enabling me to play them on original hardware now. In summary, the Satiator does exactly what it says on the box in a refreshingly no-fuss manner. I'm personally very happy with my purchase, but is it for you? Here's the unfortunate truth. The Saturn didn't have a massive library of games. There aren't many noteworthy exclusives either, and most of the few big draws it once had have since been re-released, remastered, or flat out remade for other systems, with those later revisions largely being the better way to play them. I think the appeal is limited to a very niche audience of people who grew up with, or are already emotionally attached to, the hardware. I fit that description, but I could probably only recommend the Satiator to one other person I know, and that's Richie. I do miss you, mate. That'll about do it for this video. Once again, shoutouts to Chuckleson and Crow, my two patrons. If you want to support the show, you can head on over to Patreon and throw money at me. You can also help out by liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, ringing all of the bells, and whatever else the algorithm's going to force me to shove down your throats next. Of course, now I have this device, literally any Saturn game is on the table, so if there's a title you'd like me to cover, be sure to let me know, and maybe you'll see a video on it in the near future. For now, you're gonna have to excuse me while I binge Saturn games and cry ugly tears.